Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected examiner, my name is Rhizma Aurezia from STEMAS Wonogiri. For this final semester examination, I will be reading a scientific journal entitled Comparing Religious Education in Indonesia and Japan, uh, written by Agus Munrianto, Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Abstract. This paper compares the way in which religious education has been performed in Indonesia and Japan in terms of context theory, history, policy, practice, and impact. Generally speaking, the practice of religion education in the education while Japan has weak support to the practice of the religion education. This is due to the fact that not only the characteristics of the societies of the two countries are different, but also the two do embrace different state ideology. In addition, families in the two societies play a crucial role in determining the extent and practice of religious education. Keywords: religion, religious education, state ideology, state policy, private school, public school. Introduction. It is worth noting that will recur to religion and education policy and ideology vary from one country to another in the world. Countries that embrace secular ideology, such as the United States, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Hungary, Cuba, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan, do not allow religion education held in public school, but they do allow so in private school. By contrast, Indonesia supports religion education in public school. Moreover, the state officially demands religion education as part of school curricula. Other countries whose societies are attached to religion tradition, such as Pakistan and Malaysia, share this policy. In short, the practice of religion education (RE) in a country depends on the state's ideology. There are some models of the relation of RE and state ideology. First, when the state ideology is secular, RE is prohibited in public school, but not in private school. This model can be seen in the United States, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Hungary, and Cuba. Secondly, although the state's ideology is secular, the majority of population belongs to certain religious tradition. Catholic, for example, area is allowed in both public and private school. This practice can be seen in Austria, Germany, Spain, Colombia, Chile, and Peru. Exceptional is in the case of two former Soviet Union countries, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, which chose secular ideology, but the majority of their population are Muslim. They do not allow religion education taught in public school. The third model is that when state ideology belongs to certain religion, like Islam, RE is not only permitted but is also required as part of public schools curricula. In this case, RE specifically refers to Islamic education, which consequently implies that RE in public school refers to Islamic education. This is what happened in Pakistan and Malaysia, both of which hold Islam as formal state religion. The fourth model is when the state's ideology is neither secular nor religion like Indonesia. RA is not only permitted but also required in public and private school. However, the content of RE in the fourth model is not only about Islamic teaching, but also tools of other religion acknowledged by the state of Indonesia. This paper compares religion education in Indonesia and Japan in terms of school context, state policy, history, RE in school, and student behavior. This study tries to answer a question as to way, the RE, which has strong support from state, family, and religion institutions, has little impact on student good behaviors. On the other hand, students in scholarly countries such as in Japan, who do not receive RE at all are not necessarily worse in behavior than students with RE in religious societies. Indonesia and Japan in comparison. To compare Indonesia and Japan, Indonesia has population around 242.3 million, where Japan has 126.6 million. The state ideology of Indonesia is Pancasila, while Japan adopts scholar ideology. It seems that different state ideology contributes to different practice of RE. In Indonesia, with the Pancasila as the state ideology, religion plays a crucial role in the country. There are six religions acknowledged officially by the state: Islam 87.2%, Christianity 7%, Hinduism 1.7%, Buddhism 0.9%, and Confucianism. In Japan, which calls scholar ideology as the foundation of the nation, religion plays no significant role in the country. There is no mention of official religion in Japan, although Article 20 of its constitution guarantees religion freedom, nor is there official statistic which explain the affiliation of the population of Japan to which religion. However, according to International Religion Freedom Report published in 2030, based on 2011 report by the Government Agency for Cultural Affairs, indicates that some religion groups claim that their member reached 196 million. This number, ironically more than the number of countries' population, indicates that many dissidents saw affiliation with multiple religions, and it's common for Japanese to embrace both Buddhist and Shinto belief at the same time. However, according to Edwin Reseker and Mary Jensen, 70 to 80% of the Japanese do not consider timeless belief in any religion. Indonesia's population is diverse not only in terms of religion but also ethnic language and cultures. This country has around 30 300 distinct native ethnic groups and 742 different languages and dialects. The largest ethnic group in Japan, comprising 42% of the population and are political and cultural dominant. In terms of language, the official language is Bahasa Indonesia and it is a compulsory lesson taught in the school from elementary to higher education. In fact, people speak one of several hundred local languages and dialects, and of these, Javanese language is the most widely spoken as the language of the largest ethnic groups. By contrast, Japanese culture is so more homogeneous in terms of language and culture, as 98.5% of its population speak Japanese, where the rest are small minority groups such as Zainichi Korea, Zainichi Chinese, Filipinos, Brazilians, mostly Japanese descent, and provincials, mostly Japanese descent. Former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso once declared that Japan is a nation of one race, one civilization, one language, and one culture. A theoretical perspective. Michael Cremier distinguished the remaining meaning of religion education, namely learning religion, learning from religion, and learning about religion. Religion education (RE) as learning religion means the transmission of religion culture, belief, and values from one generation to another generation. The function of religion education is thus to prepare it and to hand on religious values and tradition in society. In learning religious models, students are treated as passive beings because their position is only to receive and accept religious teaching and values from teacher. The process of transmission and transfer of these religious values is through in the creation. The model of RE as learning from religion looks for advantage of the religion of our human life. How could religion possibly contribute to solve the problems faced by human beings? What are the values of religion for human life? The RE is defined in learning from religion as that learning holds positive attitude toward RE. The emphasis of Eri is to seek what values of religion which can be employed to solve human problems in changing society. In this regard, there will be no critical judgment of religion because religion is treated as a source of knowledge and moral principles. Religion education as learning about religions means studying religion in a purely objective and descriptive manner, not merely absorbing or receiving religious values. This approach can be called as an objective form of teaching religions. Area as learning about religions has contribution to treat religion with a Christian or appreciation. Learner has to take Learner has to take distance from religion because it is an object of study. In this fine area is carried out through scientific and theological ways and critical thinking is necessary in this model of RE. Looking at the above theoretical perspective, the practice of RE in Indonesia is dominated by learning religion and learning from religion, particularly in the elementary and secondary junior and senior high school. In the higher education level, these two models are still dominant with expansion in higher education with specialization in religious studies in which religious is not only seen as a doctrine that should be accepted willingly, but is also as knowledge which can be crisis. In Japan, the practice of Eri is closer to the model of learning religions and learning from religion for private religious based school. The public school use the model of learning about religions which can be seen in the subject of history, Japanese history and world history, ethics talking about many religions and moral education. States policy on RE. The social context of Indonesia where religions play a significant role in public life helped us to understand why RE in this country is generally supported by the state. RE is not only permitted but required to be taught in public and private school from elementary to higher education. In Japan, the state keeps distance from religious because the country is based on scholar ideology. As a result, Ari is not allowed to be taught in public school, but is allowed in private school. From this perspective, the relation between the choice of state's ideology and the way in which Ari is carried out is connected. There are three articles on religious education mentioned in the Bill of Republic of Indonesia number 20, year 2003 about national education system. Article 12.1 states that each student in the unit of education has right to receive religious education in his her own faith which is taught by a teacher of that faith. Public schools do not have problem with this article because they are used to each religion. In this way, however, for private school, practically of the tools that is based on certain religions, this article is controversial for two reasons. First, this article is not in line with the right of community to hold education based on the faith of that community. And secondly, it is a big burden for this school to provide religious teachers outside the faith embraced by the school. In many cases, private schools based on Christianity have more Muslim students than Christian. The reason of those some Muslim families send their children to Christian school is not because of religion, but as consideration of the school quality. Christian schools are perceived to show good quality in terms of education. In practical level, Article 12 is not yet implemented fully, and even some Christian schools choose not to hold a religious education, but they replace it with religiosity education or communication of faith. There are two other articles in the Bill of Reno 2003 that have relation to religious education, namely Article 30 and Article 37. Article 30 deals with religious education in terms of a. The holder of religion education. B. The function of religious education. C. The content of education that hold religious education. And D. The forms of religion education. Article 37 talks about religious education that should become element of national curriculum for elementary, secondary, and higher education levels. The three articles 12, 30, and 37 of the Bill of Reno Number 20, year 2003, elaborate in detail the government relations. Number 55, year 2007, containing 6 chapters and 50 articles. Article 4.5 and 6 states every unit of education provides place and opportunity for students to perform religious service based on their religion and place for worship as mentioned in the article. Five shall be in the form of room in or around the unit of education that can be used by students to perform religious service. The above policies so accelerate the strong support of the state to RE in Indonesia. Not only is RE included in the Bill of RE Number 20 year 2003 indication that area is a part of national education system, but it also explains its detail the content of government relations number 55 year 2007. In contrast, Japan does not allow RE to be taught in public school, but is allowed in private school. There are only two articles concerning RE in the Japanese constitution. One is found in the Japanese Constitution Article 20, and another article is found in the Basic Acts of on Education 2006 Article 15. The Japanese Constitution Article 20 states, freedom of religion is guaranteed to all. No religious organization shall receive any privilege from the state nor exercise any political authority. No person shall be compelled to take part in any religious act, celebration, rite, or practice. The state and its organs shall refrain from religious education or any other religious activity. The Basic Act on Education 2006 Article 15 states, the attitude of religion tolerance, general knowledge regarding religions, and the position of religions in social life shall be followed in education. The school established by the national and local governments shall refrain from religious education or their activities for a specific religion. The Japanese Constitution Article 20 do not partly talks about RE but it does so about religion in general. The content of Article 20 can be divided into several issues. First, freedom of religious is protected. Anybody is free to follow or not to follow any belief or religion. Change religious is part of human right protected and guaranteed by the Constitution according to the International Religion Freedom Report 2013 released by the U.S. Department of State. Japan is acknowledged as a country that constantly protects religion freedom. Not only mentioned in the Japanese constitution, but also in practice it does. The second issue in the Article 20 is about freedom of religious organization. Establishing religious organization is coordinated by the Constitution, while the government does not provide financial support because the state should keep it naturally from any kind of religion organization. At this point, religious organization is not allowed to take part in the political activity. Another issue in the above article is about individual freedom to religious, namely to participate or not or to participate in certain religious practices is an individual's choice and freedom, and nobody can force somebody else to take part of or not do certain religious practice. The last statement, the state and its organs shall refrain from religious education, means the religion education is prohibited in public school and is in line with the Japanese constitution which guard and the separation of religious and state. Public schools should become public spheres which are free from religious interference. Like other scholarly countries, there will be always connection between the Japanese policy of the separation of religious and state and the prohibition of religion education in public school. Article 15 of the Basic of Education Point 2 in extent is similar to that of Article 20 of the Japanese Constitution in regard to RE. However, the presence of Article 15 of Basic of Education Point 1 is to accommodate the social situation in which internation of religious and school cannot be avoided. In fact, it is difficult to apply a strict interpretation of Article 15.2 with regard to social reality in Japan. The presence of Article 15.1 is to guide from to interpret and apply point 2 in a different way. In practice, teachers in Japan are difficult to teach the history of Japan without referring to Shinto or Buddhism, and they also have difficulties to inculcate good behavior without mentoring religiously traditional tales. For this reason, government released Article 15.1 in order to give room from the interaction between religious and school. It suggests to practice religious tolerance, to have general knowledge of religion, and to respect the position of religious in social life. This means that public education is not purely solely from religion, not in the form of formal religious teaching of certain religion, but in the form of general knowledge. In fact, to free public education from religion is impossible because the history of Japan somehow connect to Shinto and Buddhism. In Japan, there are popular words to show Japan religions, born as Shinto, married as Christian, and tea as Buddhist. Thus, interaction of public school and religious in Japan is acknowledge. The above explanation show different supports of state to RE. In Indonesia, RE receives a strong support from the state, and this can be seen through in the inclusion of three articles on RE in the Bill of RE number 20 year for 2003 and 6 chapter and 50 article in the government religious number 55 year 2007. In contrast to Japan, the state gave law support to RE, and this can be seen from the fact that RE is only mentioned once in the Japanese constitution and once in the Basic Act of Education 2006. This fact needs more explanation and exploration from different perspectives. The first explanation can be given by looking at the state ideology. Indonesia is based on Pancasila that has religious nuance. Through the first principle, we live in one code, while Japan is based on scholarly ideology that holds the separation of state and religion. The choice of ideology as the foundation of the state contributes to what action that gave support to RE. The reason of why Indonesia and Japan have different support to RE is clearly due to different ideologies, non-scholar and scholar ideology. The second reason lies in the interests of family and state. Families and the state of Indonesia see RE as an important part of people's life, while family and the state of Japan see RE in a different way. For the average of Indonesian families, the existence of RE in school is to ensure that children receive appropriate religious teaching by which they can live based on religious values. The role of religious education is to transfer, maintain, and perpetuate religious values from one generation to another. The state, on the other hand, has two interests in religious education. On one hand, the state receives maximum political support from the people, and on the other, religious education has contribution to create ethical and civilized citizens and families, and the state of Japan show a little interest in RA, for which area receives full support in the constitution and in public life. The last argument presented in this work is about the type of society. Indonesia is multicultural society in terms of religious ethnicities and languages, while Japan is monocultural society in terms of above factor. Indonesia needs RE because it can promote tolerance, peace, and mutual understanding of one fight the two others. In order to make RE is meaningful for multicultural and plural society, it is necessary for Indonesia to redefine and reconstruct RE, from merely dealing with one's own religions to those of others. In contrast, Japan do not stress the importance of RE because the country has homogeneous society that is more manageable than heterogenic society. History of RE. Indonesia and Japan have a different history of the issue of RE. RE had become the issue in Japan since the period of Meiji Restoration in 1868, in line with the modernization of education in Japan. The Meiji Constitution was modified in 1945 after the defeat of Japan in the Second World War. And with regard to religious and area, it is particularly mentioned in Article 20 of the Constitution, which guarantees the people religious freedom. In Japan, 1945 was a year of modification of the constitution, include the position of RE in public and private school. By contrast, in the year 1945, when Indonesia independence was declared, RE was hotly debated. Since the inception, RA and in particular Islamic education has been supported by the state, by including RA in national education curricula. However, the implementation of RA in Indonesia is dynamic, depending on the requirements which rule the country. Generally speaking, the development of RA in Indonesia can be divided into three phases: Sukarno era, Suharto era, and Reformation era. Looking at history, Indonesia and Japan have different stories of RA. Since inception, there was no tension between RA and the state in Indonesia. In 1950, RA was taught at elementary and junior and senior secondary of public school. It was taught under a condition there were at least 10 pupils in the class and had permission from their parents. All matters related RA are under supervision and responsibility of the Minister of Religious Affairs. In 1952, RA was practiced differently. Each religion in Indonesia had different application of RA. The 1960 plenary meeting of MPRS, Temporary Consultative Assembly of People, declared that RA becomes subject that is sold be taught in public school, from elementary to higher education, under the condition that the parents allow their children to take that subject. In contrast, there was a tension between the state and Christiania school in Japan. In 1872, the government established public school of elementary and secondary levels and higher education level. It was in the period of Meiji Restoration when private schools were established where law, medicine, liberal arts, and religious were the subject of teaching and learning. There were an interesting number of teaching customary in 1873, and many Christian denominations established missionary school. The expansion of missionary school led the government to be more aware of their existence, because this school entrusted students to admire Tenno that has close relation to Shinto religion. In fact, according to the government, Tenno cannot be approached except through Shinto principle. The government view that this action was beyond Christian school mission, and this is the reason why the government then separated education from religion. As a relation in 1889, all schools, whether public or private, were under government supervision and were obligated to teach religion at all. Thus, in the Meiji Restoration period, the reason why the state did not support RA was because of the issue of Tenno that somehow is related to Shinto religion. In contrast to Indonesia, in the period of Suharto regime, 1966 to 1997, RA was supported by the state. In the beginning of his administration, the state was faced two types of experiments. On one hand, communism, anti-religion, as a life experiment, and on the other, radical Muslim who want to establish an Islamic State of Indonesia. One of the way to face this challenge was by applying RA in school and made it is a compulsory subject for all students. From elementary to higher education, RA in this context has two missions. First, to prevent students from the influence of communism and a state common memory. And secondly, to show that the state supported the exchange of religion. From this perspective, it is possible to argue that RA was used by Suharto regime to oppose communism, on one hand, and to oppose radical religious belief, which possibly led to the effort of establishing an Islamic State. Another issue that can be compared in terms of history of area Indonesia and Japan is about area in public and private school. In Indonesia, the recruitment of area was only in public school, but after the release of Bill number 2 year 1989 about the national education system, area is compulsory in both public and private school. From elementary to higher education, however, private schools with the basis of certain religions have no obligation to hold religious education of the other religion. This policy was strengthened by the release of the government regulations number 29 19 and 90, which states that school which is based on certain religions was not obligated to teach other religions. In contrast, Japan's story saw different stories of RE. In the early of Meiji Restoration, private school held authority to teach RE, but in 18 and 1809, the government prohibited all school, whether public or private, to teach religious, and even to government proclaimed the separation of state and religion. Since 1945, religious education was allowed only in private school, but not in public school, and Shinto elements in school teaching were removed. In terms of the relation between state and particular religions, Indonesia and Japan saw different stories. The majority of Indonesia people belong to Islam, and the majority of Japans are associated with Shinto. Although not as true belief in Indonesia, the state fully support the existence of RRI and to a certain degree give advantage to Islamic religion. Compared to Japan, the support of the state to Shinto is unclear due to the decision of separating the state from religion. However, in 1890, Tena issued a document on moral education until it improper respect on education. Kyoiku Chokyu. The document contains the loyalty and filial piety of Japan's to traditional morality. But this document was claimed not to have any religious ingredient. This claim is not fully true because the document was made by Tenno and Tenno was strongly associated with Shinto. Thus, moral education that was issued and implemented in many schools was somewhat contains ingredient of Shinto teaching. In 1935, the government allowed schools to give education based on religious sentiment. Thus, it meant that religious education was allowed. The answer is, however, no, as religious education is still prohibited. At this point, it is hard to differentiate between education based on religious sentiment that was allowed and religious education that was prohibited. Looking at the context of education based on religious sentiment, which is allowed, it stems that it is under the influence of wisdom talk and method of education that led many workers and students to be influenced in sociality movement. To counter this movement, the government allowed education based on religious sentiment, and thus religious sentiment referred to Shinto teaching. Religious education, on the other hand, is still prohibited in public school because it commands explicitly certain religions, which is again the principle of the separation of religious and state. However, the situation changed in 1945 in line with the political turmoil of the Japan's defeat. The Meiji Constitution was modified. The imperial respect on education that was formulated by Tenno was abolished, and consequently, Shinto elements in school teaching were removed. At the same time, private schools were allowed to hold religious education. Area in school. Once again, Indonesia is perceived to RE, and not only is RE permitted, but also it is required in public or private school. In Bill of Republic of Indonesia number 20 year 20 and 3, dealing with national education system, Article 12.1 state each student in this unit of education has right to receive religious education in his her own faith and taught by a teacher of that faith. This means that all students hold right to receive RE in public and private school. In contrast, in Japan, based on the Basic Act on Education of 2006, Article 15, Paragraph 2 is prohibited in public school. It states the school established by the national and local government shall refrain from religious education or other activities of a specific religion. This article clearly prohibited religious education in public school in order to make school natural in religion. In Indonesia, all students should receive RE from elementary to higher education and school have obligation to provide it. However, the amount of hours is different from one school to another. It depends on what of type of school, whether it is public school, madrasah, Islamic public school, private school, or religious-based private school. Elementary students in public school receive 4 hours of area per week, while for elementary students of madrasah receive 6 hours per week. Students of secondary, junior, and senior of public school receive 3 hours per week, and the same is so for madrasah. In higher education, area is taught to credit science Islam is not the ideology of the state. The content of area in school is not only Islamic teachings, but also Christianity, Protestant and Catholic, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. However, each religious is taught separately based on the faith of student and taught by teacher of the faith. Thus, there are many kinds of RE for Islam, RE for Catholic, RE for Protestant, RE for Hinduism, and RE for Buddhism. The case is different in Japan. Although the religion of education states clearly that government school shall refrain from religious education or other activities for a specific religion. It does not mean that there is no connection at all between religious and school, because the government acknowledges the nationality of moral education based on religious thought. In 1949, the Ministry of Education issued some notes to public school. Visiting religious facilities with the aim of worship or participating in religious ceremony and festival is prohibited. Visiting those facilities for academic or cultural purpose is allowed unless children are forced to go. To use religious materials in a class is accepted for academic or educational purpose, except praising or ordaining a certain religious, and school children are free to form religious groups in extracurricular activities. Although religious education is strictly prohibited in public school, there are some interactions between religious element and public school in Japan. The first above interaction is in moral education. According to the guidance of the government, a class for moral education is aimed at encouraging this for living. In practical level, the guidelines of moral education for elementary and secondary school level impress, having a feeling of reverence for what is beyond the power of the human being as well as fostering friendship by trusting each other and learning together. Cooperating with the opposite sex in a friendly manner, respecting and having affection for parents and grandparents, and being willing to make commitments for the happiness to the family. All students are required to take subject on moral education because it does not contain and denominational content. Another interaction is in the subject of ethics, a subject for high school level, but not it is obligatory. The guideline for the subject is to teach students basic ideas of the Christian, Buddhist, Confucian, and Muslim religions in addition to ancient Greek philosophy to aid them in understanding their human status. The third interaction is in history class, where religion is treated as historical fact in Japanese or the world history. Students should take Japanese history until secondary school level, while world history is taught in high school level. Unlike public schools that are prohibited of RE, private schools, particularly those that have religious affiliation with certain religions, have freedom to hold religious education. Article 950, paragraph 2 and Article 79 of the Ordinance for Enforcement of the School Education Act explain that private schools of elementary and secondary are allowed to hold religious education based on their affiliated religion. This means that area is allowed to be taught at private school in Japan. In fact, there are 115 high schools that are affiliated with Roman Catholic Church, 93 private high schools affiliated with Protestant, 5 high schools affiliated with Shinto, 108 high schools affiliated with Buddhist sects, and 16 high schools affiliated with newly developed religious sects. In total, private schools approved by the government and have religious affiliation are 25% of the total national number. Interestingly, the high number of private high schools based on certain religious does not have any correlation with the growth number of certain beliefs in Japan. For example, private high schools based on Christianity that take 60% of total number of religious schools that have little impact on the number of Christian belief in Japan. In 1980, the total number of Christian belief was 1 million, and after 26 years, the number was 3 million according to Takata. There, there are two reasons as to why there is no connection between the number of religious schools and the number of religious beliefs. First, students who attend religious school are mostly on non-belief, and secondly, they choose to attend this school not because of religious reason, but because of prestige, reputation, or quality of the school. They believe that the school can help them to go find universities. 5. Area and student behaviors. The last part of this paper is comparing the impact of RE on a student attitude and behaviors. I will argue, however, that putting RE a solely variable of student behaviors can be turned into simplification because there are many variables that contributed to their attitude and actions such as families, school culture, society, mass media, and so on. I am not going to judge that their behavior are as a result of area alone. The same simplification may also be made by neglecting the contribution of area to student behavior, because the main intention of area is how to improve student life behaviors. Area in this context is not only seen from cognitive aspect or as knowledge, but also as affective and psychomotor. Comparing area in relation to student attitude and action in Indonesia and Japan is not easy task. In Indonesia, there are many reports of student violence occurring in secondary, junior, and senior high school, and some indeed to death. The Indonesian Commission for Child Protection reported that when in 2013, from January to October, there were 200 and 229 cases of student pros and 19 of them caused death. Two, in 2012, there were 128 cases of student pros where 104 case occurred in Jakarta that resulted in 17, that's 39 heavy insured and 48 light insured. 3. In 2010, there were eight, uh, in 2010 there were 800 cases on student violence in Indonesia. The violence usually took the form of brawl, throwing at water, and push hijack. The Jakarta Club reported student violence such as disrespectful students after paying, school suspect bullying, dealt to be placed in juvenile home. Jakarta art students are still overburdening house assault. Supreme Court upheld student brawl cyber stance. Student killed by samurai sword in school brawl report. Jakarta student attack with exceeded solution. Lasted Asian attack highlights the spreading new trend. Many reports are also provided by other mass media in Indonesia about student brawl, school bullying, and other forms of violence to a certain degree. This shows that area Indonesia has little contribution to make students behave properly in line with the existing norms. On the ground that these students receive area from elementary to secondary, junior, or senior high school, as mentioned earlier, area is mandatory subject that shall be taught in all lines, levels, and types of education. Still, area is supported by the state in terms of policy and religion, but its contribution to student behaviors remains to question it. The failures of area to give could impact on student behaviors, raise criticism, uh, one that the teaching of area is too dominant in the aspect of cognitive by imposing area as knowledge through education and memorization. As a result, students know area but do not know how make it meaningful and applicable in their life because area is merely seen as knowledge, not as fundamental values of life. In contrast to Japan, it is difficult to find the news of student brawl, violence, and schooling bullying. Students are disciplined, hardworking, and follow the rules of school. No report in mass media, social media, or television concerning student bullying or brawls. There is no violence can be seen either in school or public life. The question is, does it cause by RE? I would argue that RE in Japan, like in Indonesia, has little contribution to make students behave properly in school or public life. Some argument can be made here. First, not all students receive RE in school, only those who enroll in private religious-based school receive RE, and only 25% of all private high schools approved by the government are religious affiliated. Secondly, students who attend public school only receive small elements of religious through moral education. Subject of ethics and history chart, most of students do not care about religious, and the reason when they attend private religious based school is not because they interest in religion, about they believe that this school can help them to go good universities. I would argue the determinant factor that make Japanese students in particular and Japan society in general are tolerant, respecting each other, hardworking, loyalty, helpful, and the like are not because of RE, but the old tradition that were based on Shinto principles and had been inherited from one generation to another generation, especially start from Tokugawa, right, and then continued down to Meiji Restoration. The sublime values from the past had been mentioned and handed on well from one generation to next generation. Although there was a change in society because of modernization and liberalization, the foundation of society remained firm. This is the reason why Japanese society has entered the modern world without losing their traditional identities and values. See, concluding remarks. The implementation of RA dependent on the state policy, and the state policy on RA is strongly influenced by the state ideology. When scholar ideology is chosen as the foundation of the state, or is allowed only in private school, not in public school. The latter should be free from religion, intervention, and influence. In contrast, when Islam becomes the ideology of state, RR is given maximum support from the state to be taught in public and private school. However, public school can only have Islamic religious education, and this can be seen in Malaysia and Pakistan. Indonesia and Japan are two different countries in terms of ideology. The former is based on Pancasila ideology that is neither secular nor Islamic, but somewhere between the two, while Japan chose secular ideology. The treatment of these two countries on area is also in private school, drug policies and regulation, while the latter only always are in private school, not in public school, because public schools should refrain from any religious activities. Interestingly, the strong support of the state to area does not always give good impact on student behavior. Indonesia student growth and policy are very often reported by mass media, and the Indonesian Commission for Child Protection (KPAI) report the quality of some high school students in Indonesia. From this perspective, RE has little contribution to help students behave properly in line with the existing religious values and norms. In contrast, in Japan, it is hard to find students of high school behaving improperly by violating school rules. But this does not mean because of a religion and policy, arguing that not all students receive RE when they are in school. RE is only taught in private religious based school, and the prevalence on this kind of school is only 25%. In Japan, the old traditional values that has been handed down from one generation to another generation since 17 countries ago seems more powerful than area in making students, in particular and Japan society in general, to behave properly in line with the existing norms and values. Thank you.